I want to welcome all of our viewers. Thank you all for joining us today. We have for you today another roundtable talk from Aldea. This one's very important. I want to first thank our sponsor, AARP, for sponsoring this roundtable talk. This roundtable talk will be about voter engagement, specifically voter engagement with our 50+ voters. Yeah, I just want to thank all the viewers for coming here, and we have a panel of 4 brilliant people here with us today, and I'll give a brief intro for all of them. First, we have Uva Coles. She's the founder and CEO of Inclusiva. Uva, you can wave if you want.
Hi, everyone.
We have Will Gonzalez. He's the executive director of SEVA. You can wave if you want. We have Joanne Grossi. She's the president of AARP Pennsylvania. Thank you for being here, Joanne. Thank you, AARP, again. And we have Victor Negron. He's the vice president of public affairs and marketing at AmeriHealth Caritas. I hope I said that. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, good job. Good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're here today to talk about voter engagement in the 50+ population. As I said before, is an extremely important conversation. But I want to start this conversation just sort of getting a look at just the importance of voting in general. So, and I want to ask that to all of our panelists. Why? What is the importance of voting, and why is it important for populations to have a voice on election day? And I think I'll start with Joanne, and then we'll go down the line from there.
Well, I think it's important for everyone to vote because I've said this often: we get the government we deserve. So if you don't vote, you're not going to have any say in what happens to every important program that you can think of. Anything from healthcare to economic well-being to the climate to highways, infrastructure. Any issue you can possibly think of that affects your everyday life matters who your elected officials are. They are making decisions every day about what happens to your health and welfare. And as somebody who's served both in the Obama administration and Governor Rendell's administration, I know firsthand how important it is who your elected officials are, and not just the elected officials, who they appoint to these other positions. Who are your secretaries of the different cabinets? Who are your deputy secretaries of the different cabinets? Who are your officials who are helping to set policies? I don't think people realize how much power even the appointed officials have, over everything in your everyday life. And so it just flat out matters who is your elected officials and who they appoint. So I just can't even think of another way to say it. Who you vote for, if you vote, matters with the government you get. And we get the government we deserve if we don't vote.
Yeah, we can go Uva on that one. Anything?
Sure, not a whole lot to add after Joanne. I think she's spot on. We absolutely get the government that we deserve. And at the end of the day, we always say that tu voto es tu voz, right? Your vote is your voice. And so we want to make sure that our collective voice really is lifted and that the government that we then get reflects the needs, the desires, and the direction of the population. The only other piece I would add is that it can be a generational gift, right? If we do this the right way, what we're really doing is seeding the ground for the importance of this work and making sure that future generations can benefit from the things that we hold near and dear. So consider it not only a gift for your family, yourself, your community in the present, but also think more strategically about the future and understand that this is how you have an opportunity to inform that future.
Victor, Will, you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, great stuff, but I'm going to make it more selfish, especially since, AARP, we're dealing with 50+ stuff. They say we may, if we're lucky, to have a long life. This is personal. I'm going to be selfish. This is personal. Where's my Social Security that I paid so many years for? Where is my my retirement benefits? How's my government going to serve when I'm in a nursing home? Or when I'm going to take care of my grandchildren for their education? Am I going to go broke to pay for my grandchildren's education? I already paid for my kids, right? So it's just personal. I'm sorry, but think about it, get informed. AARP has great information about this stuff. It's personal.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. I was thinking the other day as we were setting up for this, and it reminds me, Joanne, you hit it right on the head. I mean, think about the low numbers in the census response right now, right? Think about the financial direct implications, whether you're in Puerto Rico, you're in Philadelphia. The low numbers have direct financial implications. And the only way we can resolve or fix that in the next 10 years is by making sure that we elect leadership that understands how it operates, so that if there is a problem or there is some type of normalization that needs to take place, we need some common sense folks that can represent the interests of you as an individual. So I just appreciate AARP for putting this together. I think it's critical now more than ever. And I think the vote, you know, you mentioned la vota, right? You know, your vote, your voice. We created a National Puerto Rico Agenda. We created something called Boricuenta. And what it is about making sure that you count. And I think people have become a little apathetic. So we're excited because we got to get people to get out there and vote.
Right, right. And, you know, and speaking of, you know, more on our topic, I mean, we'll bring it into sort of, you know, the 50 plus population, which we're talking about today. And I know AARP Pennsylvania recently released poll results from, you know, a survey of 50 plus voters. And Joanne, do you mind running down what some of the findings from that poll were?
Sure. I think the most important finding, and Will, thanks for touching on it, because I feel the same way. I'm about to turn 62 and I want my Social Security. But the most
Amen.
Right? The most important findings I think we have found was, no matter what your party affiliation, people want their Medicare, their Social Security, Medicaid, and lowering prescription drug prices and protecting people in nursing homes. I mean, Will actually kind of answered the question for me. You know, it was resounding. I mean, every single topic was a minimum of 87% of the people who responded, you know, supported all those programs and said they want candidates who are going to protect those programs or strengthen those programs. So, Will, I guess everybody's a little selfish because, you know, it was very clear from our survey that hands down, people want candidates who are going to protect Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and lower prescription drug prices and protect people in nursing homes.
Right, right. And I know, you know, in the past, you know, the 50 plus population is usually the voter population that turns out the most, you know, and I just, you know, for Will or Victor or anybody, you know, how has that turnout sort of driven past elections? You know, any come to mind?
Well, just if I may, Will, when you really think of it's really this the elder states folks, right? The senior citizens. We're on our way, Joanne, right? We're on our way. We're not there yet, but they vote at the highest percentages across the country, naturally. We are second. And what's been happening over the past decade is that we've been seeing a reduction in 50 plussers beginning to reduce less and less. And again, we're still at the high 50 plus percentiles. I mean, we are the folks that come out and vote. But it just speaks to the sense of this feeling of almost this sense of apathy, this almost concern over how are we going to be able to address the issues when we do turn 62, 63, 65. So we've been seeing a slow decline in folks turning out, but nothing compared to the declines we're seeing in the 40-year-olds and the 30-year-olds and the 20-year-olds, right? That much as we want the millennials to come out here and do something, they really don't come out and vote. So we between us and our senior citizens, our elderly over the age of 60, 62 above, we are the core voter. So it's imperative that we stay engaged.
Yeah, the older citizens saw when it was almost illegal for us to vote. I mean, there's de facto and de jure. So the law said that we could vote, but the facts were that you could not vote. And there were barriers and there were other things, and people literally got their heads cracked to be able to vote. I mean, you can, Mr. John Lewis, right? He bled so that we could vote, and many others in the Latino community. And now in Philadelphia, Berks and Lehigh, you can vote in Spanish. By federal law, the ballot has to be in Spanish and all voting things need to be in Spanish. Of course, you know, I know IDEA reaches New Jersey and Delaware. There are some counties in New Jersey as well that are mandatory Spanish voting. For the older people, they've seen how tough it was to get the right to vote, so they exercise it. For those in the middle, like Victor said, hey, it's been a little tough because again, they're busy. The reality is that you need to have 2 jobs at minimum wage to survive. So they have 2 jobs, a cat, a dog, 2 kids. It's just crazy. And then election day is only on Tuesday, and between this time and that time. And so it's just crazy. And so now that we have mail-in voting, that's important, number one. And then last but not least, our future, our grandkids, great-grandkids are going to help us, because every 30 seconds in the United States, a Latino turns 18. And so we're hoping that as they become more conscious, they will be more active, and they will help us, the older folks, to go out and vote and be informed. And then we can make sure that if they're not as active, we grab them by the ear.
Could I add to one more thing to that great comments? Victor said it, actually in the 2018 election, people over 50 made up 61% of the electorate. I mean, so by far we were deciding, frankly, who won. So I hope, though, that'll inspire younger voters, because I think Will said it, that, I'm old enough that I do remember the civil rights marches, and that I grew up in a time when some people didn't have the right to vote. And so, if you're my age, you remember that. Maybe I personally could have voted, but, I do remember the marches and the visuals on TV of people being beaten up and killed who are just trying to vote. And so I think for our generation, we remember that and lived through that. So we take it seriously that this is a right, and we want to make sure we exercise our right to vote. So hope we'll be inspiring the younger generation to come out to the numbers that we are in these past elections.
Right, and I think another thing, and I think Uva might be able to jump in on this. We see it among still like you mentioned, the older Black population, the older Latinx population. They were banned from voting. But I want to ask Uva, are the same sort of is that same sort of passion there in those communities, to vote? And maybe we can go off.
Sure, absolutely. I think that we also have to remember the moment we're in, right? So this isn't just, and for every election cycle, we say this is the most important election cycle of a lifetime. And the reality is, given the moment that you're in, it absolutely is, right? Every single election cycle matters. I think when we talk about Black, Latino populations, obviously the emerging majority, we know that by the year 2045, we will be a minority majority country, right? So this means a lot. And so what we know about these populations is those same overarching issues that I think Joanne spoke to affect all of us, right? We are thinking about the economy. We are thinking about healthcare. For those of us who are 50 years and older, we're really thinking about our future and whether or not our healthcare, our prescriptions will be accessible, right? And will be affordable. So those issues, I think, are similar. They're affecting our Latino populations, our Asian populations, our African American and Black populations, because there's some nuance there as well. Those are overarching. But in this moment, 2020, with COVID, not even in our rear view mirror, but really in front of us, right? And responses needing to be thoughtful about the disparities that COVID is causing. Certainly those of us who are most vulnerable. So our older populations, no matter what, the demographic, the ethnicity or the racial background might be, are caring about this election cycle in a pronounced way. We know that those disparities are also impacting people of color, right? Specifically, Black people, African American people, Latinos, and of course, our Native Americans, which we don't even collect enough data on. And that in itself is part of the issue that we need to grapple with, which is why our vote matters so dramatically in this election cycle, right? So across the board, what I would say is the same key issues are there. And then on top of that, you add concerns about disparities, concerns right now about civil unrest, about how we're thinking about policing. So all of those are issues, no matter what side of the political spectrum you kind of sit in, and even if you are side agnostic, at the end of the day, these are issues that are impacting all of us. And I do think, to Joanne's point, those of us who kind of walked through the civil rights moment and movement, who faced significant barriers to have this opportunity to vote, we have not forgotten, right? And I do get to include myself in the group finally. It took me a minute, but here I am, right? So we remember those moments, or we have enough proximity that this moment, that 2020 and the things that we're seeing in our very own backyards is reminiscent of those moments. And so we recognize that how we vote will have an impact on how we move forward, not only politically, but socially and in every possible way. So I would say there's some common themes that are really kind of an umbrella for all of us.
Nice. Does anybody else want to add anything else? Or I feel like Uwe covered a lot there. No? Okay, cool. So with that being said, I'll go on to sort of, what are some of the voting options that 50 plus voters, because a thing that's been going on, of late is especially in 2020 with as Uwe mentioned, coronavirus, and I think that's the big factor. But there's a lot of different voting options that are out there going into 2020, and they were there before, but they're more prominent now. So I'll pitch it over to Joanne. What are some of the voting options ahead of 2020, just as to set a base for the rest of this conversation?
Sure, and I know Will's more of an expert than I am on this issue. Excuse me, but actually there's some good news here. I mean, obviously we can all vote in person, and we can talk about the safe procedures that are going to be put in place at the polls for that. You can vote by mail-in balloting, and of course now in Pennsylvania, anyone can request to vote by mail. That you don't have to have a reason now to vote by mail. And of course you can do absentee balloting. And I think the big issue that came up a couple of weeks ago with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruling is that now there can be satellite offices in all the counties and drop boxes for your mail-in ballots. And what's important at those satellite offices, you can actually register to vote there. You can also request your mail-in ballot at that office, fill it out, complete it, leave it there. So in essence, you can vote early because you're going to be able to request that mail-in ballot, fill it out right there, leave it there. Otherwise, you could take it home and put it in a drop box later on. But again, lots of options now to make sure that you can vote safely. Important to remember the deadlines. I guess we'll get into that later, but important to remember the deadlines, including, now you can register to vote up to 15 days before the election, which is October 19th. It used to be 30 days, now it's 15 days. So again, lots of options and ways to make Pennsylvanians vote safely this upcoming election.
And I just want to ask everybody, what has it been like in your work or like even in your life to sort of engage voters around this, all the options that are ahead of you? What has it been like? So we can start with Uwe. I'm going to start with Uwe.
Sure. So I have the opportunity professionally, of course, to work with individuals at every end of the spectrum, right? Especially in terms of demographics. So younger voters are certainly those I've been engaged with for some time. Some time ago, I led civic engagement for a university. And so there was a pronounced focus on young people really engaging in this process. So I'll speak to that for a second, and I'll ask my colleagues to speak to some of our other demographics. One of the things that we recognize for young people is in this moment, if they are college students, this looks different. In the past, we could rely on colleges and universities to really be the epicenter of engagement, where first-time voters could really get introduced into the voting process in a completely different way. They were really immersed in it on college campuses. And so with many of our campuses closing or having some limited interaction among students, that kind of immersion looks significantly different this year. And so we will certainly see those impacts. I think the best of colleges are trying to figure out, as we all are, how to still maintain that engagement and make sure that students have access to information. But part of the barrier this year especially is we have, number one, that lack of engagement on college campuses, or a different kind of engagement. The second piece is there's still question marks about how to vote. We know that college campuses pull students from all over the country, and that states have different ways of engaging in this voting process. What young people want at the end of the day is they want clarity and they want meaning, right? They want to know that, they want to know how to vote, and they want, don't necessarily have the patience to figure out exactly how to do this. And our processes, unfortunately, are still a little bit complicated for many of us. Young people may not necessarily have or exercise at times the kind of patience to figure out how to walk into a space of knowing. And so that is something that we continue, I think, to work on, to make sure that there's clarity for those young individuals. But the other part of it is, because we know that's one segment of the young population, we of course have young people who are home, right? Who have been home, who are working hard, who are looking at the world and trying to figure out how to engage in this process. The clarity is still a bit of a concern for them as well. So that's still a barrier, even when they are in community. So I think part of what we see in this particular voting cycle is people are raising a hand and just asking the how of it. You know, how are we able to access information? We know that young people access that differently. What we have seen on both ends of the political spectrum is a lot of outreach and an interest in making sure that young people understand what the issues are. I talked about meaning a little bit earlier. Young people, for as much as we like to say they're not engaged, they want to know that candidates are credible. They want to know what the issues they really stand for are. They're not necessarily appreciative of a whole lot of double talk, so they want to just have clarity in messaging as well. And we owe them that. So that's part of what I think we need to continue to work on, to bring them into this process of just democracy, make sure they understand that they count. And I'll close with one small thing, which is, I think Victor started us off by really, sharing what we know to be true. In the past, the turnout by young people has traditionally been exceptionally low. We know that. We work on it, but it is a challenge, which is why the 50+ year population is one that we count on, that we need to continue to be engaged and to teach young people how to do so, right? How to get engaged. But we also know that this year, 2020, right, over 30% of the population of the voter eligible population will be younger people, right? Generation Z and millennials as well. And so what we know is they have a whole lot of political power, and that is untapped power. So if ever there was an opportunity to kind of raise the stakes and make sure they understand that their vote counts, it's certainly now. What I love for those individuals, the downside to the economy and the challenges that we're having is we do have generations that are living together again. In some cultures, that's a good thing. In others, that there's some concerns around that. But the bottom line is we have that engaged population, the 50+ year population, living at home with some younger individuals, right? And what an opportunity to educate them on the importance of this election cycle and to kind of lock arms and make our way to the ballot in whatever way makes more sense for us in a safe way. So I'll hold on to young people. I'll keep lifting them. And I know that they will absolutely use their voices and make sure that they have done their job this time around.
We can go, Victor, did you want to chime in on what your engagement's been like?
Actually, I love what Uwe was saying, because I'm looking at Joanne Grassi, right, and some of your amazing folks, that you work with, right, in terms of engagement. And as a caregiver, what AARP did for me as a caregiver was amazing, because I'm taken care of. And then Uwe, as you're talking, I'm sitting here talking, thinking, how does the 50+ population engage our young people, right, as that mentor? Look, doesn't matter who you vote for, but to not be engaged is not acceptable. So I think there is a golden opportunity right during these times for us to really share about pertinent examples of why the vote is important. And I think for me, one of the critical things is I'm coming from a perspective of being a committeeman in the 19th Ward, a judge of elections. I remember fighting for 22% voter turnout, any way I could to get somebody to vote. And then looking at the last presidential election where it was 53%, I think it was, Will, or like 50+% voted. Pandemic. Each state has its own processes for ballots. Depending on what side, there's going to be so much chaos created that I really do think, Uwe, that part of our responsibility as 50+ year old voters is to stand firm, to be diligent, and to be strong and be the leaders, right, Will, of our own household, and make sure that our young folks vote. So I think you made a great point. It's going to be really important.
Yeah.
And I think Victor's bringing up a good point about the information, disinformation, misinformation, and valid information. And experienced voters can provide some of that. But yes, I think, it's just a matter of making sure that everybody turns out to vote and recognize the importance and the mechanics of voting.
Yeah, yeah. And I think with that, I mean, you know, well, you mentioned the mechanics of voting, and you know, Uwe mentioned before, sort of, you know, we're in this moment where people just want to figure out how to participate, how to get involved. And I understand, and I know Saba put together a video. A big thing that's going to happen this year is mail-in voting, considering the pandemic and all the extensions that have been granted. And as I said, Saba put together a mail-in voting. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Will, to sort of explain how this video came together, and then you can show it and, you know, walk us through how it's done.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share this video. And again, it's a 90-minute video. It's nothing big. It's just the mechanics, and we don't want people to get caught in their vote not counting because of some mechanical issue. And the mechanics of voting are, and we're starting to show some of the video here, where you get your ballot, you got to open it up, make sure that it has, you read the instructions. Again, there'll be ballot questions that will be presented as well. So you read the ballot questions. In Philadelphia, Berks, and Lehigh, the ballots will be in English and Spanish. So you'll be able to get the information both not only on the ballot question. I think the key part that's on the video now is make sure to fill the oval. It is not an X. It is not a check mark. It's like when we were taking those standardized tests. If you and use blue or black ink, you cannot use any other ink color. You can't use a pencil number 2. No, it's blue or black ink and the full oval. And you'll be amazed. One of the top voting advocates in Pennsylvania, when he was doing his June primary ballot, used an X. And then he had to go back and go, oh my God, what did I do? And so these are the steps, the mechanical steps that you got to do if you're going to vote by mail. So make sure, again, blue or blank ink. The other thing is, and I know we've heard a lot about the naked ballot. And no, it's not about wearing clothes. I know it's in the fall, so you will wear clothes, right? But it's about the secrecy, or I call it the privacy envelope. There is a mechanical reason why you need to put your ballot into a secrecy envelope or privacy envelope. And that envelope is to make sure that nobody does hanky-panky with it while it's there. Once you get that envelope, you got to put it inside of the main envelope, right? And so that's also very, very important. So again, the naked ballot, the secrecy, privacy envelope is huge. 100,000 votes are going to be nullified in Pennsylvania because of the naked voting or the naked ballots. The other place where we trip is on filling out on signing the ballot. And if you notice on the ballot, there's 2 places to sign, right? There is where you sign as a voter, or on the right where you sign as an assister. So if you're helping someone to vote, you have the duty to declare that you're helping somebody to vote, and that is on the right side. On the left side is where you sign. In Pennsylvania, there's not a signature match requirement. What there is that's an attestation that you, Jane Doe, actually filled out that ballot and sent it in. You would be surprised at how many times people forget to sign the ballot. Now it happens, right? You got 2 jobs, you got the dog, the cat, the kids, your partner's being a little difficult today, and so you forget or you don't get to sign. The other thing that is huge, and we talked about disinformation and misinformation. There's a disinformation campaign going around now that to make sure that your ballot gets to the election office, you need to put 2 stamps on it. I challenge anyone to right now find 2 stamps in their house. You may have them, but some people don't. And so you're going to say that you're not going to cast your ballot because you need 2 stamps? Hey, in Pennsylvania, you don't need to put stamps on the ballot. All you need to do is fill out your ballot, use the privacy envelope, put it in the big envelope, sign the big envelope, and you can mail it because postage is paid. Make sure to put your return address in case there's a snafu. But most importantly, you need to make sure that you sign the ballot and you send it. And there's going to be a lot of voter protection folks out there. I'm sure AARP will also be out there to help you. So I would recommend that if you have any questions about this process, contact AARP. Aldea will be doing some coverage of this as well, and they'll be able to give you correct information.
Yeah.
I could jump in for a second, Nigel, just for a second. I loved everything that Will said, and I think sometimes we might miss the importance of even that visual that he just presented, right? Because, you know, when you think about over 100,000 votes that may be nullified, that is, I mean, think about margins and how close we've come in certain elections. So it's really critical that we get the mechanics right, and that's part of the confusing piece. In my mind, part of the opportunity this time around is to engage individuals in your community, right? Engage the more seasoned population. If you have an aunt, an uncle, grandparents, and they are interested in voting but won't be able to get to the ballots, that you use technology or even take a walk to their home if you're able to, and show them what the process actually looks like. Because when you think about it, it is such a tiny little detail, right? Forgetting to sign the back or forgetting to use that extra envelope, which seems to be one of the biggest issues. And all of that could be mitigated with the right kind of information. So I think we have a heck of an opportunity. Hopefully that video can be shared on the chat box so we can circulate that with those who are on the call today and with others. But the bottom line is there's an educational piece to this. Information is critical, and if you are able to share the information that you do have with those you care about, I think that within that you are strengthening the opportunity for voter participation.
Yeah.
Amen, Uva. And I want to share with the group that there are paid operatives. Their sole job is going to be to identify how a vote doesn't count. I mean, it's you know, when you think of suppression as a strategy, it's one used by all the parties, by everyone. And I look at Pennsylvania, I look at Florida, I look at some of the states. And again, I love the way you put it, Will, you know, misinformation, disinformation, you know. If you're a voter and you want your vote to count, you have to pay attention to the details, because they're going to matter. Olvidé por hacer esto, olvidé. It's not going to count. And then, as you mentioned, Uva, by the way, you see Zoom? We'll just share the video. Zoom with somebody helping them. You know, do what you have to do to help folks execute a process to vote. I mean, it's hard enough to get up and vote because, like, you know, we're busy, but it's really going to be important, especially in the state of Pennsylvania, whether you vote left, whether you vote right. Protect your vote, fight for your vote, and make sure that you and your family and friends know what they need. Share the video, but please don't take it for granted, because what Will was saying, there are paid operatives who are going to be coming to PA, coming to Florida, and that's what they're going to be looking, wherever we can find a niche. And there's going to be lawyers involved. Sorry, Will, love you, but they're going to be involved, and things are going to get a little crazy. So protect your vote.
Great. And I think the thing we're talking about right now is sort of you know, the trust that's around these sorts of processes, and maintaining the trust around these processes. And I think a big thing that's happened, you know, of late, as you mentioned, is all the mis and disinformation around it. And I first want to, before we talk about a little bit more about that, I want to talk about just sort of in your interactions with 50+ voters. What sort of attitudes do they have about mail-in voting? Because I think mail-in voting, especially in Pennsylvania, is kind of a newer. It's not a new thing, but it's something that I think a lot of people are coming around just now to, like, embracing. So, you know, why don't we start with we'll start with Victor, and anybody else who wants to chime in can talk about that. You know, what has it been like?
Oh, Nigel, you picked the wrong brother to start with this, because my 50+ voters are going to vote. Okay. Again, our conversations are, we're going to go to vote. People are preparing to vote, N95 mask, whatever it takes, identify locations. So again, my older folks, and maybe I'm 53, so I'm getting up there, but we are not going to trust the mail-in process. You know, the conversations, and I said, look, you can follow the process. Here's the form, But a lot of my compadres and my comadres and my folks in my age range, they're going to show up. They're going to go vote. They're going to do what they need to do. I think the younger folks, hopefully, and I hope some folks will use it. But my experience has been that people are saying, no, we got to go vote. That's been what I've been hearing.
Well, yeah, and the ease of use, right? Because this one here is like, wait a second, I can trip here, I can trip there, I can trip here. Nah, I'm just going to go and do it. I think, however, that also puts them susceptible to what could happen that day. If it rains too much.
Yeah.
We know rain and weather are huge, right? Number one.
Mhm.
Number two, misinformation. Anybody here has everyone here has a lot of power by just posting on Facebook. Will and Victor got into a big fight at the precinct and they closed it down. It's not true. But somebody reads it, oh, I can't go vote there because Will and Victor got into a big fight. You know, there's going to be crazy stuff and lies spread, misinformation, disinformation. And so we need to have reliable places where they go, is it true that they closed down precinct so-and-so? You know, and then be able to say, no, you can still vote. That is not true. There'll be a lot of disinformation and misinformation. And so again, we need to go to our trusted community partners, our churches, our community-based organizations, our AARPs, et cetera, and be ready for election day. When somebody says something, you can double check and make sure that your precinct is open.
Yeah, I would agree. Go ahead, Joanne.
Oh, no, sorry. And so I want to, echo those comments. We did do part of that poll we did recently, did show actually that the majority of the over 50 population are going to vote in person. It was about 58% said they were going to actually still vote in person, despite what you've heard. But I do think a game changer really is that Supreme Court decision. I do think having the satellite offices and the drop boxes, because what we've heard recently about the Postal Service has a lot of people worried, but knowing that you could, I think, drive to a drop box and put your ballot right in the drop box, is a game changer. And the same thing with the satellite office, that you can go in person, fill out that form, complete it right there and you're done. I think those are game changers. So I think the Supreme Court decisions from a couple of weeks ago really is going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. I would only add that, realistically, there's a complicated relationship between communities of color and government, right? Systems of government. We all know the historic reasons beneath that. And so when it comes to voting, I think that there are some populations, certainly African-American populations, Latino populations, and so many others who have some questions and concerns about the new ways in which we can participate in voting, right? And so with that, we anticipate that many people of color have every intention, especially our older voters, of showing up at the ballot, right? But I want to underscore Will's point, which is voter suppression is real. Voter suppression in this moment has been amplified. And I think social media has certainly played an even larger role in disenfranchising, in confusing, in creating a whole lot of noise that at the end of the day creates chaos, and chaos leads to confusion, and confusion sometimes leads to a lack of interest and participation, right? So there's a lot going on. But having said that, what I think we need to prepare for is that populations, communities of color have every intention of trying to show up. You put COVID in the back of this and their health risks and a number of other concerns that they have to deal with, which is why I think it's important to have this multi-generational approach to this moment and make sure that we are reaching out to those in our families. We talked earlier about the need to support young people and getting engaged, right, and participating. But on the other side of that, I think young people also have an opportunity and a responsibility to reach out to mom and dad and uncles and, tu abuela y tu abuelos y ayudarlos, ¿verdad? We have to make sure that we are also creating a plan for voting, making sure that we know how, if they plan to get to the ballot, to the voting booth, they have a way to get there safely, right? They have a way to get back, and they also have an opportunity to plan to stay. What happens in certain populations, especially, or in certain communities, especially those that are more socioeconomically marginalized, is we know that the wait is going to be longer. We know that, some of the Equipment that ought to be in full working condition may not be. Those are the realities. There's some barriers that have shown up every single year. We anticipate that they're going to show up again in a pronounced way. And so I think that having a multi-generational plan of action to make sure that no matter what the barrier is, we have heels dug in, and our intention is to stay the course until we can cast that ballot. And that is irrelevant of where we stand politically. The bottom line is of a responsibility, and I think we have to have a plan along with that responsibility.
Right. Well, and speaking of sort of having a plan, and as you guys all mentioned, a lot of the voters will be showing up to the polls to vote. What should 50 plus voters and what should voters in general know about voting in person in 2020? Voting, whether they be COVID-19 measures, finding their polling place, early voting, and we could start with. Why don't we start with Victor again? What should they know?
So I think the critical aspect is a plan. That if you're going to vote, you need a plan. And that plan can't be on election day. That plan has to be paying attention to what's going on. That plan needs to be making sure that your polling place is going to be open. And if it's not going to be open, I need to call the right telephone numbers. Or, as Will mentioned, that's my big fear, right? We're talking an MPRA right now. That's what I was telling Will. We're going to need a Latino hotline in Philly. We're going to need, because those of us that have lived this life, they'll close a site, something happens, and then you call 686-5093 and nobody's there. Nobody speaks Spanish. Not that they don't want to do a good job, they just don't have the infrastructure. So I think the idea of building a plan to vote, and I love the idea that you should have a plan to vote, whether you're going to do mail-in or you're going to go to vote. I mean, there should be a plan. And again, and Nigel, the toughest part is on election day, and I think Will mentioned this earlier, it's not going to work out well logistically, mechanically. And then Uva mentioned it, voter suppression is an absolute strategy in Pennsylvania and Florida. Let's be really clear. For those who want to act like it's not, no. There's going to be, so you have to make sure you have good context. And again, not just, you need a Will Gonzalez in your life, right? You need a good community leader that knows what's going on. So that's really the point. Well, I think they need a plan, right, guys? Plan.
Well, thank you for your kind words, Victor. But, again, another thing is we got to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel. There are some great voter protection resources at the national level. And I think, and I can't speak for some of the national organizations, but a lot of people have come around those organizations at the national level. And so there's going to be one number that people can call. But I think, what Victor said and Nuva said and Joanne said is really important. Early. That is as early as possible if you're going to do vote by mail, and as early as possible if you're going to do it live. And then be ready to wait. Polls open, correct me, Victor, 7, 8 o'clock, be
7.
there. Yep, be there, be ready. Don't let yourself be distracted, and use love if anybody tries to use hate, because that they're going to look for incidences. Again, like I said, people will go in there and you start a fight, they close it down for a second because they got these guys fighting there. We don't want that. And so just do it. And again, what I say for our older folks is grab the little kid by the ear, 18, 19-year-old, go vote, come with me.
And if I could add to that, they're right. Some polling places are going to be changed now. There's going to be some consolidation because of COVID. So it's really important to know where your polling place is. There are resources, from the Commonwealth, votespa.com. If you go on that website, you can find out all the information about deadlines to register to vote, absentee ballots, where your polling place is. And if you don't have internet access, that's 877-VOTES-PA. We realize a lot of populations don't have the internet. So fortunately, there's a phone number as well. But I agree with what everybody said, of course, have a plan. Even if you're going to do mail-in or absentee ballot, you should have requested one by now, right? So don't wait. There are very specific deadlines, and you don't want to wait to the last minute. And again, same thing with voting in person. They are going to have social distancing in place. Poll workers will wear a mask, will have gloves, there'll be hand sanitizers. Again, consolidation of polls to keep it safer, but really important to have the plan all the way around, because I agree with everyone. I'm sure you're going to have to wait, have that bottle of water, have a snack with you, and be ready to wait. And again, really go to votespa.com or call 877-VOTES-PA to get any information you need.
I wanted to mention one thing about timing, and I'm sorry to jump in, but there's also a need for poll workers. And I'll defer to Victor, who's been there and done that. Most of those positions are elected, right? But if for whatever reason the elected poll worker can't come in, then the local county can fill in that spot. And so obviously, most of our poll workers are long-time poll workers for many years. And so sometimes because of the situation, be it their health or the health of their family, they can't do the poll working that day. And so then the local county is going to need some people to help out. And so there's an active recruitment process. And again, if you want to be a poll worker, do it today. You need to be trained. You need to be ready. Don't wake up on October 20th and say, I want to be a poll worker, and then complain that they never called you. By October 20th, you should have been trained. And so if you are interested in being a poll worker, pick up the phone, reach out to, I know that the Complete Count Committee of Philadelphia, in Philadelphia, or if Joanne can repeat the number for the Department of State, they are looking for poll workers. And you can call the Department of State and they'll connect you. I know some of the folks watching this may be from other counties in Pennsylvania. So go ahead. And if you're in New Jersey or Delaware, again, you can call your local election officials and they will also connect you. But I always remember Victor on election day being able to go to his precinct, just say, hey, how's it going? And he'd be a trusted person of saying how things were going. Poll working is not easy, but it's also very rewarding. And one caveat, it's addictive. It is very addictive because you feel like a super citizen.
Yeah.
We could use.
No, well, you're one.
Go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And the beautiful part is, again, we keep talking about the moment in time. I remember the times when a poll worker was getting $80 for 16 hours of work. Now they're paying $200. And by the way, Will and Uwe, I don't know if you guys know this, and Joanne, they actually pay you for training now, which is new, because what good is it to be trained? But if you are interested, as Will said, you can also go to the website. So in the city of Philadelphia, they actually have the presentation, the training materials. I don't know if I can do it or not. There's no reason why you can't. Just take a look at it and get engaged. And it's one of the most important positions because, Will talked about credible. If the poll workers are not credible votes, it's a problem. And as long as you got one credible person at that table that can represent the interest of not a candidate, right? The interest of everyone, our democracy as it lives today, our Republican form of democracy can win. So it is, and it is fun. I had a ball. I had a really good time. I got to meet people. And Uwe, we were there training young people. So please make sure you get involved.
Yeah, I would add that this is an interesting time to think about kind of passing the baton or sharing the baton, right? With every, again, COVID is a major part of our consideration set as we move. All of these moving pieces are kind of coming together. And so those trusted, those credible community leaders and just activists who may not be able to sit at those tables and support our process need help. And I think this is a heck of an opportunity for younger people across the board to exercise their full political citizenship, right? And to certainly be trained and kind of run their leg of this relay race, right? We've relied on a certain segment of the population to carry democracy on its shoulders for so long, right? And I think that if nothing else, this is a moment in time when we can say this should have been a shared responsibility to begin with. And so what is it that younger people can do in this moment to learn from the historic memories, right, of our family and our community leaders and others and begin to carry that baton forward? That is how I think we grow stronger as a democracy, as a country. Again, forget the political, the political sides that you may lean on. At the end of the day, we're made a stronger nation when we are actively engaged. And for as difficult as 2020 is, I think it's forcing us to look at things with more clarity, right? With more meaning, and to consider, where did we drop the ball and who has an opportunity to pick it up and run with it? And I think when it comes to voting, getting trained, going out there and doing our part, if ever there was an opportunity to do so, it's now.
And can I add one more thing before we move on? I have to agree completely. In the primary, my niece lost her job from COVID, temporarily unemployed, 28 years old. She became a poll worker. So not only did she get paid for the day, you're right, Victor, but she also, it said it changed her perspective on voting. And how important it is. And she already was somebody who registered to vote at 18 and has always voted. But even this, she said, inspired her even more. So I agree. Obviously, the younger people are generally going to be safer than older people like myself working at the polls. So I think anything we can do to encourage, my niece signed up again to be a poll worker now. Anything we can do to encourage the younger people in our life to be a poll worker, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think the last section of the voting part that I want to get into, I think is really key for I think our Latinx population is sort of, and Will mentioned it earlier about the ballots and any voter information will be translated into Spanish based on Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act. And I just want to pitch it over to Will. Can you dive into sort of Section 203? Just give a short little explanation of what that means for people who are non-English voters.
Well, and to tie back to what Victor said about the census, so based on census information, any jurisdiction that has at least 10,000 people who speak a particular language, or 5% of the population, voting age population that speak a particular language, the Voting Rights Act says that you must provide all the voting information in that language. In Pennsylvania, right now, we have only 3 counties, Lehigh, Berks, and Philadelphia, who must by law provide information in Spanish to all voters. That means that the total ballot, that means that every advertising that they do or any information has to be in that language. Those counties also have a need to secure interpreters. And by the way, and again, Victor, please help me when you get a chance, especially as we get older, sometimes we need assisters to go with us into the ballot booth. And it doesn't mean, as long as it's not our employer or our union member, somebody can go hold my hand and help me understand what I'm doing. And I'll defer to Victor on that, and I'm sure he'll add to it. But getting back to 203, that also requires that interpreters be available in some places, or that the polling workers will be able to speak Spanish. In Philadelphia, they've gone beyond Section 2 or 3 of the Voting Rights Act and said, we're going to help as many people as possible who are limited English proficient. And the Office of Immigrant Affairs has some great guides on how to vote in various languages. And also, every polling place in Philadelphia has a phone that is directly connected to an interpreter. So if you show up and you are a US citizen who doesn't speak English well, and you speak a language that there's no assistance for there, you can ask the poll worker to get you an interpreter to help you understand better. And last but not least, and Victor, please help here too, in terms of voting ID. Philadelphia, that's not a problem. It could be a problem in other places. But the only time that you need to show strong ID is it's the first time that you vote at a precinct. It should not be when you've been voting at the same precinct for 20 years. Thank you.
Are you right on the money, Will? You were perfect, brother. And so in Philadelphia, there is a declaration form that you can have filled out, and it can be whoever you choose and select willfully can help you go in and vote. And no one can stop you. They have to fill out a form, again, because they want to make sure that somebody's not being coerced. But it is really that simple. And as Will said, stand and fight for your rights. If you need interpretive services, there's a phone at every polling place where they have to get them on the phone. And if they ask you for the ID and you don't need it, in the book it's going to say you need an ID if you need it. But if you've been going there then make a phone call and report it. Because if they're doing it to you and you're strong enough to stay and vote, they're going to do it to somebody else who's not going to vote. Again, so just stand up for everyone's right to vote. Good job, Will. Thanks.
I'll add something just around that as well. I think in this country, we've done a disservice to non-English speakers. And what I mean by that is, when you have an accent, when you have come from a different country where English is not your native language, we have created some stories, some narratives, some unfortunate narratives about a lack of fluency. When the reality is, I think the presence of a second language simply means that you have added competency, right? Added competency. And so I bring that as a backdrop because I think that if you are thinking about individuals who are concerned about going to the polls, whether they will be understood or they will be able to understand, it's important to remind everyone, if you are eligible to vote, right? You have an opportunity to use your voice, and you have a responsibility. You are no less than anyone else, right? Language proficiency is not a requirement in order to vote. And so all of the great resources that Will and Victor spoke to are there for a reason. And that is because you have an equitable opportunity to exercise that vote, right? And so it's important for all of us to feel strong and secure, no matter what our language proficiency, English language proficiency may be. Remember that here in the US, over 25 million people, right, do not have proficiency with English as a first language, right? So what that means is we have individuals who are fluent in other languages, and who may have some challenges communicating. But the bottom line is the information is accessible. Here in Pennsylvania, especially, the information should be readily accessible. And if there are some additional challenges, it's important that we use the resources that are available to us, because it's not just a matter of immediate translation when you get to the ballot. It's also a matter of accessing the information in advance so that you're informed about the candidates, you're informed about the issues, right? So that you can then go into that ballot, into that booth, or use your mail-in ballot, and you're powered by information. So all that to say, and I have to just throw in the plug as an Afro-Latina, right? Someone whose first language was not English, right? I completely understand the concern and have those individuals in my own family who struggle with the language sometimes, and sometimes have a little bit of hesitation in showing up to certain places where they think that language might be a barrier. This is equitable, right? This is equitable. Language proficiency is not a requirement.
Well, and just for 30 seconds, just to say that even if you are monolingual English, there are still challenges. Mm-hmm. There was an article by the angry grammarian. That person has a column on the Inquirer, and he tore apart the vote by mail instructions, because even though they were written in English, she said that they were hard to understand and hard to
confusing.
Follow. And yeah, and again, and to echo what Victor said, lawyers get involved and they mangle the language. And so I think it's important, again, the resources that are out there to help, objective resources that you have a relationship with, from AARP to your church, to your community organization, they will give you clear, correct information.
Yeah. And I only a couple more questions. I know we've been going for a bit, but I think the last section I'll talk about is just sort of, being informed about the candidates and where the certain candidates stand on the issues. I mean, we talked in the beginning, Joanne talked about the issues that the poll that AARP Pennsylvania did, and some of the key findings of what big issues were for the 50 plus population. But, and we went through that, but I want to ask, where can voters go to find information about where candidates stand on those issues that mean a lot to them? And I can go with Joanne. I can ask Joanne on that too.
Well, I think it's been said. I mean, I really hope people, we've got debates coming up, for example, and so I hope people will be watching and hearing directly from the candidates for what's going on. And again, of course, we also have important congressional races going on, state reps, state Senate races. I think people forget how important those races are as well, and how that affects everyday lives in Pennsylvania. I think people completely forget about the importance of the state rep and state Senate races, which are going to be going on as well. So I think we all have an obligation to make sure who's running in our counties, who's running even in our districts, obviously who's running for president, and in some states U.S. Senator, and pay attention to what debates and information that comes out. We do have our own website, aarp.org/PA votes, that we hope people will go to get information. But really, in a lot of ways, the onus is on us to be paying attention. All candidates, even at congressional levels, have debates or voter guides, or their positions are in the paper or on their own websites. So I think we have an onus to make sure we're paying attention to what all the candidates, even again at the state rep or state Senate level, are telling us about issues that they're going to fight for, that's important to them, and that they care about the issues that we care about.
I think it's important to use trusted news sources. We know AARP has been here before, is going to be here after. Aldea has been here before, is going to be here after. So I think you got to be careful not to go, oh my God, somebody from this newspaper I've never heard of told me, yeah, is that newspaper in this country, even though it's saying that it's in our neighborhood? So you got to be careful with the misinformation, the disinformation. Go with trusted resources, the AARPs, the Aldeas, and others.
Yeah, I mean, that was like my second question. And my other question was just, my last question to finish out was, and I feel like we've mentioned it throughout, is like, where can listeners go, for more information about this topic? Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've answered that. Do you guys feel like we've answered? Is there anything else you guys wanted to shout out? No?
Definitely AARP. I think Joanne is a wealth of resource. We've probably all been on the website repeatedly for a number of reasons. So Aldea obviously was mentioned earlier as well. So I think that's a very good place to begin. Think about your local areas as well. And at the end of the day, we all know what credible is. Credible is that individual who you can look in the eye, right? And you know that the information can be trusted. In this moment, we can't vacillate. This moment calls for credibility. And so I think between those resources, it's a great place to start.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, then with that, I want to thank, I know we mentioned AARP a lot, but I want to thank AARP again for sponsoring this roundtable talk. And I want to thank Victor, Joanne, Uva, and Will for your time today for this great conversation. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you guys did too. This was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.